Hi, welcome back to SEO On Air. I'm your host Aaron, and today we have Jim Ferguson, Head of SEO at Optimising, with us. We talk about Shopify SEO, website migrations, and how AI is continuously taking over. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yeah,
So, for those of us who are trying to find you but can't really find you, could you tell us a bit more about yourself?
yeah, certainly. So I think I have a pretty low profile, which I think is by design. I'm kind of a little bit more of a classic kind of SEO introvert. I don't really put myself out there too much. For people that I know or people that I trust, like I can be a little bit more
Okay.
extroverted with them, but I tend to be a little bit more. I like just being anonymous and that kind of stuff as well. So um, basically, I've been head of SEO or head of digital here at Optimising. I've been here for about 3.5 years, roughly. Before that, I was at another agency. In my past too, I've also done freelance. I've worked with a few startups. I dabbled with a bit of development as well, so that's where I kind of feel most strongly or kind of feel most comfortable with the technical aspect of SEO. Um, I first got involved in SEO working for a big travel company here in Australia. And my first kind of entry into SEO was mainly the outreach aspect. And then I kind of got more into the technical side as I kind of saw that was an area that kind of interests me and kind of there'll be a lot of demand for technical SEO in the future. In terms of like my educational background, after high school, I went to university. I studied computer science for 2 years, but at that time, I didn't really enjoy it because it wasn't really at the time there was no emphasis on the internet. It was more about software engineering and electrical engineering.
Right.
So I moved to a bachelor of business with a major in marketing, and I feel that like my interest in technology and the internet and then marketing kind of SEO is a great fit because it's kind of like a
Mix of.
intersection of both, I guess. So,
Right.
but yeah, one of the things I'm slowly doing now as I get a little bit more older and kind of getting a little bit more comfortable is starting to put myself out there a little bit more. Hence being on this podcast, but you won't find me as a LinkedIn influencer or an
Right.
SEO. I prefer to just kind of be a little bit anonymous in that regard, I guess. So.
That's fine. I mean, like I try my best also to kind of keep a low profile, but
Yeah,
because of these podcasts, I think now it's slowly not happening anymore.
sure.
Um, but with the mix of computer science in your history, along with development and bit of marketing as well, when did you really realize that SEO was your piece of cake?
I think like I've always just been really fascinated in the internet and the
Right.
ability and just the potential, I guess. Um, in high school, like I tried to build my own website and just kind of went, wow, this is really interesting. Um, even to this day, all the developments in like the AI space and that kind of stuff just totally fascinate me, and I can really like um, I'm just kind of excited about that whole space. So I
Right.
think like SEO is great because it is something that you can get paid for. That you need a particular skill set for. You have to be kind of someone who's very, I guess, detail oriented,
Right.
who's curious, who likes to kind of you know dig down into little rabbit holes and try and find different things and kind of look for solutions. And I think also because it's always changing, there's always something happening. It's kind of exciting too. Um, the fundamentals will usually stay the same, but
Right.
every week there's something going on. So it kind of keeps me excited. And I think that also too, when I was a little bit younger too, I kind of got a little bit arrogant. I thought I am better than what I am, and then something would happen and totally change the way I kind of perceived something about SEO. So
Right.
it's just a very interesting kind of industry to be in, and yeah, I kind of I'm never bored. I guess it's really
There's always like a challenge there for you.
100%. It's kind of like I think that just I'm one of those people that my brain doesn't really switch off very often.
Right.
I kind of like will use the analogy of like doing a jigsaw puzzle. So like each new project that I'm on or each client that I work with, it's kind of like starting a brand new jigsaw puzzle, and you have to like try and put all the pieces together and understand all the variables and all the relationships and the stakeholders and the the business needs and wants and competitors and intent. There's all these things that you have to really think about, and I think like it's definitely a very rewarding career too, and
Right.
something that's I just like to do. So yeah.
So if that is something that's your cup of tea, right? And what if I were to hand you a half-made puzzle and you can fill in the gaps over there, just for like
Yeah,
a time example type thing?
yeah. So I think like obviously I'd have to kind of like make a few assumptions to start
Right.
off with,
Yeah.
but the longer that I worked on the puzzle, the more I'd kind of see how the patterns all kind of would fit together and how the pieces kind of would fit together and slip into place, I guess.
So let's say if I am an SEO agency or I am an e-commerce agency and I'm now coming to you with a half-solved puzzle. I need help to kind of find a platform and to improve, let's say, basically my website's visibility.
Yeah,
It's kind of a long-winded question, but basically, what kind of strategy can you provide for me along with the advantages as well,
yeah,
or
sure.
tips and tricks?
Yeah. So I think like I'm very, very big on trying to understand like the entire picture or the the
Right.
what's going on, I guess. So I'd probably ask you a lot of questions. Um,
Okay.
if you were a client too, and I kind of had access to some of the data to help me make these decisions, and I'd probably ask what your goals were for SEO, for the website. Um,
Right.
I'd probably ask you a lot of questions about your industry. I'd also want to understand like the intent of someone who might want to buy a product that you might sell, or kind of understand the hopes, dreams, frustrations, fears of your target market. If there are
Right.
any like personas or that kind of stuff like that, I'd kind of ask uh, just as many questions as I could.
Okay.
Um, I think then too, like I'd take a real good look at your website, um, not just from a technical aspect, but from trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who wants or needs your product or service, and
Right.
just trying to look for like areas of opportunity. Um, and probably also from a technical perspective, just kind of look at and make sure that everything's working behind the scenes with the crawling, indexing, rendering, Google can find your content, understand it, that kind
Right.
of stuff like that. But then also just try to like use my previous experience of just working with a variety of other clients and kind of like solving these smaller problems, and then just seeing what happens, and then like using those that collective experience to kind of give you a strategy or a game plan that you are happy with and I'm happy with, and we could kind of try
Right.
to implement. So yeah.
So let's say we've got like half the puzzle complete. You have a vague idea of what exactly I'm trying to offer in terms of products, as well as the industry I'm in. We'll throw in budget as well.
Yeah.
You have an idea basically. You've asked for a good amount of questions where I've hypothetically answered all of them.
Yeah.
But now I'm coming up with a very, let's say, amateurish type question where I come and ask you that while I am an e-commerce store, there are quite a few platforms out there. One, which one would you recommend? And two, why would you recommend that?
Yeah, so I think I'm slightly biased in that most of the e-commerce clients that we work with are with Shopify. At Optimising, the agency that I work with, we're Shopify Plus partners as well. But I think because of that, like if you didn't have the resources, or you kind of weren't technically proficient, I'd probably just say Shopify straight away. And even if you weren't, there's a few reasons why I would also like recommend that too. So I guess to give you some context, before Shopify,
Right.
let's say like late 2000s, 2007, 2008 kind of e-commerce space, you'd have like all these problems with building a site, and you might have a custom built site, and you'd probably have to have developers, and there's probably like feeds that you might have, like an XML feed from one provider, or there might be data from another one, and it might be very, very messy, and you might have to kind of organize that kind of data. Then you'd have to like build out your storefront. You'd have to have like login systems, authentication, forgot password stuff,
The whole shebang.
PCI compliance was like a real big problem that we used to have before like Stripe came along, and kind of helped with your credit card payments. There was a lot of security issues. There was all these problems and things like uptime and hosting and site speed, and this is before like people would use their mobile phones.
Right. Yeah.
You had like Internet Explorer being the main browser. Like there was all these just problems that could go wrong, I guess. And I guess that Shopify has really solved a lot of those problems. A, from a developer perspective, but B, also from someone who just wants to sell online. They don't care about all these things. They just don't care. They just want something that's easy to use. They can easily add their products, organize them into collections, and sell. That's all they really care about. And I think that Shopify has done an excellent job of that. And I just wish that I'd bought Shopify stock
A lot earlier.
ages ago as well. So they've really, really like solved a lot of these difficult kind of problems that people had before this. So it's kind of like with a lot of these like newer kind of things, like even with like the TikToks and the YouTube and I'm trying to think of a better example, but like
Those two fit.
Yeah, there's all these like a lot of these platforms as services, I'm going to call them, kind of thing, have kind of allowed people that don't necessarily have the technical proficiency or the background to easily do something and get in line and get in front of their audience and sell. So I'd probably go for that. There's not really too much of a steep learning curve. Right. It's pretty good, user-friendly.
Comparison to, let's say, big commerce or WooCommerce,
yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure you are still standing strong with Shopify. But if there are, let's say, specific needs for specific platforms, would that be the case?
I think like 9 times out of 10, like Shopify would be
all case.
Would be a good case for everybody. I think like, let's say like Shopify versus WooCommerce or Magento, which is now called Adobe Commerce, I believe. Right. You'd have to have like, it'd be self-hosted. WordPress has kind of had a reputation for potentially being not as secure. There's just a lot of things that can kind of go wrong. You do need someone who kind of knows what they're doing behind the scenes to just kind of make sure everything's working properly. So I think like Shopify has solved a lot of these problems. So like, for example, like from an SEO perspective, auto-generating the sitemaps. So you add a product to your backend, it's in the sitemap. You don't have to add it manually. If you don't sell that product anymore, it removes it from the sitemap. Like that's just saved so much time. Yeah. Images too, like you can upload your JPEG image. Shopify will compress it for you. They'll make it responsive. Image source sets show the appropriate sized image to the appropriate browser, depending on what viewport they're using. If your browser supports WebP and some of these newer next-gen image formats, it'll show you that smaller size and stuff. So all this heavy lifting and all these like things that
you might not be able to do.
Yeah, you might not be able to, and maybe it just automatically comes out of the box kind of thing. So it's fast, it's secure, it scales well. Like CDN stuff, like you can have all your static assets to your nearest data center. there's just a lot of the hard, heavy lifting from a technical perspective that Shopify does. And for those people that do want something a little bit more custom too, like these days too, Shopify is kind of getting into the headless space. They have the hydrogen product. I think it's based kind of like on a Next.js, and it's a React based anyway. And it does allow someone who is technically proficient to basically totally change the front end to however they kind of want, I guess. Kind of what I see too is like there's a lot of people who sell things online, but things like discount coupons and like free shipping calculators, email signups, there's thousands of apps that you could use for each kind of part of the sales process. And it's just like it's a very good ecosystem. It's very developer friendly. I kind of sound like a paid shill here.
I was going to say,
yeah,
kind of make it.
So I'll also talk about like maybe some things that we don't like too about Shopify too, and to even this out
just to
a bit too. But when I first kind of got involved into Shopify, like I was kind of a bit frustrated because I was like, I can't edit the robot's text. You can now, like that's been changed recently.
It's not really a con.
Yeah. But things like, I guess, things that people hate about Shopify.
Because even earlier when you were mentioning that the customization option wasn't really there, I was like, yeah, that's a point I'm going to use. And they were like, no, that's something that they've changed now. And I'm like, well, there goes my point.
Okay. So I think like the things that I didn't like about Shopify when I first kind of got involved was, first of all, the very rigid structure of the URLs. So you've got like /products, /collections, /pages, /blogs. It's a very strict kind of
layout
way of doing things. And one of the things sometimes that people kind of get annoyed with would be the internal linking. So if you're in a collection, like let's say you're in like men's jeans collection or something like that, and then you click on the product, the URL that you're going to be taken to is not just the products, it's like /collections men's jeans /products /whatever. It's not the canonical or the original URL. So from like an internal linking perspective, that sometimes there's a redundancy there, and some people aren't a fan. People will get out of this by changing some of the settings and some of the code, so it's a bit flatter. But then sometimes like the side effect is you won't get the breadcrumbs automatically coming up, I guess, as well.
These were issues that were done when you first started using Shopify?
Yeah, so like I'm also like so internal linking for me is like very, like it's an easy win. It's very powerful. Changing, having a variety of anchor texts, having the site structure, like organizing the site, especially kind of like these sorts of things are just kind of basic things that for me like are just easy wins for most sites. There's something I can control usually, and it's often very impactful. Another kind of interesting thing there is like I've lost my train of thought, but with like that internal linking, you don't have a subcategory either. So like maybe with another system you have like men's and then men's jeans and then whatever you're going to have, kind of thing like that. But with Shopify you have collections men's and collections men's jeans, and it's you don't really have a subcategory. So that's another kind of annoyance. You can have what they might call tagged collections, where you can have these tags, but one of the downsides to this approach is that you can't often or easily customize title, meta description, on-page description for these tag collections. So you really have to make sure that you internally link everything and you've kind of all got it kind of organized properly, because every collection is just /collections /whatever it is kind of thing. So they don't have the subcategories, I guess.
But I think these are all issues that they've kind of rectified now, or
so for the classic Shopify, like some of these are still in play, but I think like so many sites use Shopify that Google kind of knows how it works anyway, kind of thing. But where we kind of like may see some changes in the future is with using the Shopify backend, the payment solutions, the image stuff, like all that kind of stuff. This hydrogen stuff is still kind of in early days.
Right.
Using like faster kind of builds, server-side rendering. I think like the hosting provider is called Oxygen as well. So that you could have a really, really sleek, fast, great, headless build, but it also uses all the good things that Shopify are known for, like the customer experience, the checkout process, all that kind of stuff. Would be using Shopify's strengths, I guess, as well. So yeah,
I think to kind of put a little summary on the entire thing, Shopify ultimately is the platform to go to. So now to add on to the puzzle piece that you've been solving so far, you've pretty much solved the puzzle, and I'm just adding more pieces to it.
okay, yeah, no worries.
So I've decided now Shopify is the way to go. I'm going to now build my e-commerce site on that.
Okay.
The problem now is most of my original site is not on Shopify.
Yeah.
So now how do I move it to Shopify? What exactly is the process? And what are some common issues you've seen people do when they've migrated their website, along with some quick fixes as well?
Yeah, sure. So we do partner with some of the top Shopify developers in Australia. We get a lot of referrals. We share a lot of things with them, and I do see a lot of migrations coming my way. And part of my job sometimes is to make sure that the migration is successful. Sometimes there's a successful one, sometimes there's a less successful one. And I guess the ones that aren't as successful would be when the planning has been a little bit rushed. So maybe like, for example, like before you undertake, one of these big kind of projects, some business people don't understand the concept of like the classic 301 or 308 redirects.
Right.
And that's kind of where I see the most of the danger. They were on a different platform where the URLs were different. They've imported all their products into Shopify, and that's usually been pretty good. But they haven't redirected the old URLs to the new URL. They go live. People search things for Google. Google still has all the old URLs indexed. People click through and they get to a 404 and they can't find what they found. And slowly over time, like Google will eventually crawl the new site and understand, but sometimes you see some failed migrations because the planning wasn't there. Another kind of thing that I sometimes will see is that the way that the site was structured, they had it in a certain, internal linking structure that kind of made sense. And then when they moved to Shopify, they haven't really kept that same kind of hierarchy, I guess, as well. Even simple things like not bringing over on page descriptions, titles, metas, not understanding, here are my top 100 products on the old site.
Right.
Have they moved over successfully to Shopify? Or here were my, top 25, PLPs or collections or categories, whatever you want to call them. And there hasn't been any kind of understanding of these ones were the biggest driver of non-branded search and getting lots of revenue from these, and they haven't been moved over. Or maybe it's been a business decision, like we don't want to stock this anymore, and they totally just lose 25% of traffic or revenue or those sorts of things. So bad migrations are kind of the biggest thing. So if a person is prepared, that's fantastic, and they give me lots of time, and they give us lots of time. So I will crawl the entire old site and hopefully also have access to, a backup or a staging site or something too. I will then, make sure that we've pulled all the data that we need. We have a good snapshot of what the site used to look like. We have an understanding. I also potentially would like Google Analytics data, Search Console data, so I know what your top performing pages are and I can make sure that they have been moved over to the Shopify build, kind of a one-for-one, and they're redirecting properly. So in terms of things like how Shopify makes it easier is like, there's a lot of like easy ways to just import whatever old feed. So there's, let's say you're on Ecommerce or something, there's often ways to just move your database over, and Shopify kind of make sure that everything's like pulled over, or WooCommerce, like all that kind of stuff is done, which is fantastic. It also helps if you have a point of sale system or something, if you have like a physical store and an e-commerce store, like that, it all just talks to each other and all updates properly. That's usually something to just be careful about as well. But yeah, like make sure that I have as much detail of the old site as I can, and then obviously make sure that the important on-page elements that were on the old site also exist on the new site. And we've had people who've had older e-commerce businesses. Maybe the user experience wasn't very good. Sometimes hosting was a little bit sketchy, a little bit, sometimes it's there and sometimes it's down, kind of thing. Site speed, sometimes an issue, sometimes just mobile and user experience. And moving to Shopify has kind of helped a lot of them. And sometimes conversion rate can go from like 1.3% to like 2 or something like that, and that can equate to thousands and thousands of dollars every month for a particular business. So there's many benefits, but there's also a lot of migrations that you have to make sure and have to understand, and obviously if you can get an SEO involved so they can just kind of make sure that all of the important things have been addressed, it does make it very successful, way more successful, I guess.
When we do talk about success, though, in migrating a site, are we also considering the SEO factors that come along with it? Because what if you do migrate a site and then your traffic starts to drop?
Yeah, so sometimes like you might have like that initial drop as Google kind of understands, hey, things have changed. It's a little bit like, I use the analogy for a lot of clients in that like maybe you're having a birthday party and you send out your invitations and it has your old address, and you don't tell anybody, here's my new address, and they go to the wrong place, kind of thing. So sometimes that can happen. But I think that for most cases, let's say you use something like, there's a good kind of app that I kind of recommend that's called Cart to Cart, which would kind of import your old products and all that kind of stuff into Shopify for you, and that's really good. I would still always, though, get all of your important URLs that you used to have and make sure that they are redirecting properly to the new site before the migration. So kind of like often when you have a new Shopify site, you have a myshopify.com address, sometimes a password, sometimes not a password, but I'd make sure that all of your old URLs that you had were using that My Shopify address, and just making sure that they are redirecting properly and they're going to the most relevant page or the product page, or the closest category or collection as well.
Okay. So I feel like technically the puzzle that I've handed you, I'm in good hands. You've pretty much cleaned it up and set it right.
I hope so, yeah.
But I want to know as a transparency point of view, because like I think if you are, let's say, signing on an agency or an expert to help you out, you do have to have that transparency.
Yep.
So I want to know if there was a difficult time when you had to like move a Shopify store for a client. I mean, not move a website to Shopify. And what were some of the common problems you faced?
Sure. So I think like a lot of it is just like education, and just trying to obviously communicate with the client as much as you can, keep them kind of involved with every step of the way. Like tell them like, that there's a risk involved in this step, and here are some things I'm going to look at, and that kind of stuff, and just keeping them in the loop. Sometimes too, like we will, that maybe there's a client that maybe has very, very granular categories and subcategories, and they just make thousands of collections, and like maybe that collection only has 1 or 2 products, and we need to kind of educate them to say, hey, you don't need to create this collection because it's kind of redundant. Google's going to prefer the product. There's no point in having a very, very granular one. Sometimes with variants too, like let's say like your sizes, colors, these sorts of things, like we kind of want to make sure that that's kind of done in the best way as well. the classic, it depends. The SEO answer is always, something that we have to look at, but making sure that, if we do have things like duplicate products, that we are canonicalizing properly. We're making sure that Google can, understand what's happened, all the signals are there. And then from then, usually once it's kind of settled down, we'll kind of look to how we can look for more opportunities or make some improvements as well. Another maybe kind of thing sometimes that we see is some business owners get a little bit app happy. So Shopify by itself is quite fast and really, really good, but sometimes too on your dashboard, you might get a slower kind of speed, a site speed kind of score. Site speed's not sometimes a consideration. It just depends what industry you're in and that kind of stuff as well. But if you have 45 apps, slowing down your site, like that's not a very
That's a definite red flag.
Yeah, definitely too. So kind of like looking at from a holistic point of view and just making sure that like that migration is as successful as it can be, I guess, as well. Sometimes it goes really, really well. Sometimes it can be a little tough, I guess. In terms of like one of the hardest ones I did was a custom built e-commerce site.
Right.
All of the URLs of the existing ones were all just numbers. They had no words, I guess.
Right.
So it's very hard to cart didn't work, anything like that. So I had to like crawl the site, look for things that were in common from the old site to the new site, do custom extractions, try and match titles, H1s, elements, prices. That was absolute mess kind of thing. And when you've got 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 products, it's very painful too. So for me, that's where like a bit of my programming experience comes in. I'm going to try to look for logic or look at like, bits that each page has in common and try and match them that way. Lots of scripts. I guess my favorite's Ruby. That's kind of like what I'm most comfortable with, but I know also now there's a lot of Python scripts where you can kind of like do a bit of the fuzzy string matching. So it might have been like, men's jumper size 10 or something like that. And then the new URL is men's woolen jumper 10 size or something. Like just the words are in the wrong, but it can kind of match.
Right.
And there might be like a coefficient or something that can kind of tell you how close the match might be. I think I've also like scared people off migrations as well. No. But I think like
if anything, sorry.
The biggest risk is making sure that you've double checked everything right. Is all there. It's very hard to roll back.
Like from what I've heard this entire call, if I was a complete novice on Shopify, I wouldn't be really scared of it. Yeah. I think the only thing I would have to be aware of is the being prepared part of it.
Yes.
Because I know that if I know exactly what I have in my backpack, I'm pretty sure the journey ahead should be fine.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just like the education aspect and right. us being, keeping you in the loop, being transparent. This is what we're doing. This is the stage we're up to. This is why it's important. This is why it's not important. And trying to just like help the person that way, because if the migration makes sense and, Shopify does make the site easier to use, easier to pay, buy stuff, like all those sorts of things that are kind of, it's well known for, it can add, thousands and thousands or millions of dollars to your bottom line. So it's definitely worth, pursuing and researching and understanding if this is the right for you. But I feel that, like Shopify's, the dev experience is really good. The ease of use for people is really, really good. It's really allowing anyone who has a hobby or anything to just set up a store and just try and sell things. And right. It's a great first step into, the online marketplace for a lot of people. So it's definitely done a lot of good things. And that's one of the reasons why it's one of the most valuable right. tech companies in the world, I guess.
You mentioned while migrating and in general setting up your Shopify store, there is a lot of basically behind the scenes work that has to be done. A lot of data entry or just data gathering as well. So in cases like this, where for one let's say, brand or website, you have to do thousands of pages. Would it be advisable to just take the time of 1 week, 2 weeks, however long it takes? Or should it just be, we'll give it to someone else to do it for us?
It depends. So we try not to touch too much of the actual data process. I feel that that's more of, it's kind of outside the scope of where we would sit as an SEO agency. We're more just making sure that the end result is successful, and the page and the site is kind of there. So we do work with a lot of developers and just other companies that we have partnerships with. They're pretty good from that perspective. But I guess like it all kind of comes back down to like a business decision too. So sometimes there are just bits of stock that you just don't want to sell anymore, or the products that are out of date, but they might have got traffic and they might have got, a lot of visibility, and they're kind of drivers of the business. But if you don't sell them anymore, there's nothing that we can really do unless we just redirect it to the closest thing that we can. But if it doesn't exactly match, sometimes that kind of traffic source will fall off because it's just not matching the intent of the person searching for a particular thing. But it's I feel though that like for Shopify just in general, there's a lot of good customer support. There's a lot of good apps. There's like this process of like importing data. They've looked at all their other competitors and kind of made sure that it is easy to move, products, categories, collections, whatever, blog posts, pages, customer data, just whatever's needed, tags, all sorts of things. Made it really, really easy to kind of move into Shopify, I guess, as well. I think also like Shopify is also getting, but like it's slow steps, I guess, sometimes too, but it's just taking a lot of these pain points out. There's been a few changes recently too with things like internationalization. So one of like the kind of the criticisms of Shopify previously was you'd have to use a subdomain rather than your path. These days, a lot of e-commerce sites just prefer to use blah.com / ENAU for Australia, or what have you. And now with Shopify Markets, you can like start to do that as well. So you could potentially open up new areas. There's a few things like auto translating some things. I'd still recommend getting a professional translator if you were going for a particular market, but you can start to target people in their own language and in their own currencies and all that kind of stuff. And things like hreflang tag, the stuff that I would think of as an SEO, like a lot of these problems have been solved by Shopify automatically. I don't have to worry about it. And that's fantastic.
We've now done the initial set. We've built a little bit more around it. I was thinking we can make it now, if it's possible, a 3D designed puzzle where I start giving you more complicated questions.
Sure. Yeah.
This might not.
Sure.
All right. This might not be the exact order of how you should technically start and run a website, but for the purpose of this hypothetical, we've found out what platform we want, the e-commerce store. We've settled on Shopify. We've kind of successfully migrated all of my old content and website data to the new one. But now I'm kind of like losing traffic and I want to kind of build up again. There are, let's say, some technical behind the scenes stuff with Shopify that I can do to at least correct the migration part of it. But what kind of, let's say, marketing strategy I can use to now improve my brand reach and engagement with the new website?
So I guess it also depends. I'll maybe throw a question back. Like, do you have your own custom-made products, or are you a retailer of someone else's products? Or
the purpose of this example, I am making my own products.
Making your own. Okay, fantastic. So I think like that definitely helps in that maybe your SEO strategy is also aligned to you growing your brand and a lot of like that traditional marketing, I guess, as well. So if you're just what I might call like a me too, where you just have the exact same stuff that everybody else does, why should I buy for you? Like what's in it for me, kind of thing. But if you are unique, maybe we need to look at your site and make sure that you are explaining how you're different and then what that means for a potential customer, and what benefits they might get from buying your particular product. Maybe what are some of the side effects, or like the outcomes that they might get, whether it be like a actual physical one, or the way they feel, like the mental way that they feel as well. And kind of looking for how your particular product or the things that you sell help someone, whether it be to make their life better, or to stop them from losing something, I guess, as well, or that fear of loss, or
if I gave a specific example of the product, would we be able to give a full strategy then for it?
I'll try. Yeah, I'll try my best. Yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah.
Okay, so just for funsies, I guess, I'm producing gummy bears that can are healthy for adults and can provide a protein-packed snack, I guess.
Awesome. So,
any
I
more
guess,
questions to help you again formulate?
no, I think like that's kind of started. So like, I think that I would kind of think about who might want to buy something like this.
Some gym people, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to. Yeah.
Okay.
So people who are worried about protein, obviously people who are trying to potentially break down muscle and regrow it and get stronger. Maybe also people like vegetarians or vegans that maybe don't get the animal protein and they need like some plant-based one, if it's vegan friendly or vegetarian friendly. Maybe it's a good easy snack and kind of a convenience thing, where maybe sitting down and having like a protein-based meal is quite hard to cook and hard to digest, but these little gummies can just be ate throughout the day and can be kind of a convenience thing. So kind of looking at all these sorts of ideas of how someone might, or why, kind of understanding who would kind of want this.
The target audience. Yes.
The target audience, kind of thing. And making sure that at least on the homepage and on most of your pages, you do have all those kind of signals that help them understand. Things like, your social proof aspects, your trust and credibility, your kind of like, you accept all the payment stuff, you got reviews that are authentic and real, not fake ones.
Speaking of trust and credibility, EAT as a factor also kind of plays into this, because I don't think selling medical type gummies should be taken by anyone, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like it does have that, your money, your life, health kind of aspect to it too. Like you don't just want to get sick because of this, and this can impact a person's health. So there's definitely like a trust and get credibility aspect. Potentially too, you'd have to have some third-party dietitian or
tester, I guess.
Someone, kind of going for that. And these are more on-page elements, I guess, as well.
Right.
But also, like, it might even start with just understanding who wants and needs these sorts of things. So, like, I'd probably spend a lot of time there. Also, like, we might call it keyword research, but like, kind of understanding what sorts of things people are kind of searching for. And with keywords, like, there's a whole, that's a whole other 2-hour
different podcast.
Yeah, 100%. But are there any like common entities? I could go on Reddit and look for like forums and trying to work out where your target market are hanging out and kind of understand and even just be a passive observer and just kind of understand the motivations behind people. I might look for like who are potential influencers in that space and just kind of get a big understanding of how all the dots kind of connect, I guess, as well. Then are you using the right language that they're using? The keywords that you're targeting with your pages and your titles and your on-page descriptions and those sorts of things, are they relevant? Do they match the intent of what people are trying to search for? And then with keywords too, like for some products, you have your funnels, your top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel stuff. For those who don't really know, like the top of the funnel stuff is like the informational stuff, or I'm not really aware of my problem maybe yet, whereas the bottom funnel is I'm ready to buy. and that's kind of like a graph like that. So looking to see, do your product pages match that bottom of the funnel? Do your collection pages or category pages kind of match that kind of that middle of the funnel, non-branded kind of search term stuff? And then do you have a lot of informational content, blog content stuff, any kind of content marketing resources that can help someone make an informed and educated, purchasing decision, I guess, as well. And then from there, like you have outreach and partnerships and things like what off-page activities could be doing to kind of build up your brand and kind of get it well known, I guess. So a lot of SEO is looking at sites and looking at competition and kind of making all these like these best calls or these judgments based on the information that you find. But a lot of it too is just traditional marketing, and like you have a product or a service that is unique, and then like how is that uniqueness a benefit for a particular user, and trying to then educate the customer or like persuade them that yours is better than the competition or the other alternatives on the market.
You've been in the industry for quite a while, and you've mentioned traditional marketing as well.
Yeah.
So do you feel like there are maybe current trends that are now emerging that could maybe do the same thing that you mentioned, but in a more quicker or better way?
Yeah, so I think like definitely like I'll get to like things like AI to help and that kind of stuff, and we might go down that road maybe eventually too. But I think also too just I think that depending on your product, you need to like make sure that you're authentic, and especially consumers these days, like your competition's a click away kind of thing, and you have to be trustworthy. You can't just do things for the short term kind of thing. So I think that in general, my approach to a site is to do the thing that's right for the end user or the customer, and that's usually good for Google too. It's kind of it's a very blanket statement, I guess, but trying to provide value to your customers, not to rip them off, to actually help them with their problems, and try to create and foster this relationship. That's how you build a brand. So basically Google is prioritizing brands because that's who we trust. Like 10, 15 years ago, I could create a site really, really quickly and I could rank really, really quickly for something. But these days, you might have what we call like the sandbox or something like that, where you just don't have any trust or credibility in Google's eyes for 2 or 3 years kind of thing. And there's definitely a preference towards like the bigger brands. And you do kind of have to build up not just a website, but you have to have a brand too. Like you have to make sure that you've got your social profiles and all the other kind of trust credibility angles, and you're in the right niche directories or business directories that you're supposed to be in. If you're in the medical field, you should be in like some sort of government registrar or something that kind of has that trust and credibility. And if you're missing some of those things, like your SEO can really, really suffer. So I kind of see the 10 blue links aren't 10 blue links anymore. Like there's like Google's interfaces are everywhere, and like there's all these new things that are happening. It used to be all about content and keywords. Now it's not really. It's about understanding, the intent behind why someone is searching for something.
The next range of questions are all going to be about AI.
AI, great. So I'm fascinated by AI, definitely. And yeah, I could probably talk about that for ages too. But yeah, like what's I guess the first question?
So I think kind of to fill in on what you already said, you mentioned how Google doesn't really bother about it as long as the user intent is being filled. In that same breath, when it comes to AI content, do you think Google really gives two craps about it? Or is it again finding the user intent and then still pushing it forward?
Yeah, I think the intent will still, kind of help. So I think like last year, especially, and this year as well, like Google's talking about this helpful content update, and they don't care really how content is made, just as long as it's helpful and it's useful. It's not just adding to the spam of the internet. So I think like in general, AI is not some magic bullet or that's going to like help you rank really, really well and that kind of stuff like that. You still need a human to kind of drive the technology and then double check everything and make sure that all of the the nuances and stuff that should be there are there. So like AI can't ride a bike. Like it can describe riding a bike and it can read about
Not
other
yet.
people's opinions of riding a bike. They can't ride a bike yet, unless Boston Dynamics
Boston.
now they get their robots and bikes, and they're probably right now they're probably doing something like that. But there's always that first party experience, and I think like another kind of major change has been that extra E in the EAT, like this experience aspect too. And I think like that's important because some people are after the expertise, but other people want to read about the actual experience of actually using something or trying something or like seeing what people want. And that's where that kind of people want those authentic connections. They don't want to be sold to, or they don't just want someone to just talk about here are all the benefits.
Yeah.
I
But
think like
here's the counter though. What if I ask, let's say, the AI tool, specifically ChatGPT, because I think that's what it's in both of our minds.
yeah,
But if I specifically ask ChatGPT to pretty much provide that experience for me, while it might be fake, it might not seem fake to others though. So
100%, yeah. So I think like the power of AI, at least I see, is that for some people, they might be experts in their field and they know a lot about their field, but they're not very good at articulating themselves or writing. They're just, I'm one of those people. I'm not, but I'm one of those perfectionists who takes 2 hours to write something. I just can't just do it. It's just, I want to make it really, really good. Yeah, I have to, But what I found now is like, I can kind of give AI some dot points and I can ask ChatGPT to like try to start the article for me. And then I can just edit it and just change and just tweak and it's a time save. It's fantastic. It might not always get it, and there's definitely a kind of an art and science in how you might prompt these large language models on what you kind of want, I guess, as well. I think some of the frustrations that people have is they just do what we might call the one shot, where they just write me something, and they press enter, and it's rubbish kind of thing. But you often need to give it some more context and kind of it's a chat, at least ChatGPT, it's a chat kind of interface. You get your response back, and then you chat back and you say what you want changed and stuff like that. And it's kind of this iteration of like trying to get what you want kind of thing.
How does one mix SEO and AI?
So I think like AI is really, really good for things like, let's say you have unstructured data, and you can say, hey, Google, can you just, whatever schema you need or something, can you just make this structured, and it will, kind of thing. Like you can give it like addresses of local businesses, and it will just create the local business schema for you, and usually quite accurate. It's fantastic. Things like pattern matching for your redirects and that kind of stuff like that, there might be some logic that it can do. I think also too, like it's pretty good at understanding like sentiment as well. Like you'd give it reviews and it could tell you whether it was positive or negative. Keyword research a little bit too, and you kind of like come up with ideas. I'd still would do that manually, definitely, because like it's an important step.
And also that ChatGPT and some AI tools are only limited in their knowledge. Like I think up till 21 September.
Exactly, yes. So kind of what people are doing, I guess, to get around that. So I think like basically the way that I think that it helps SEO is like it's a time saver. Things like you've got heaps of meta descriptions that you don't want to do. And so a meta description, again, isn't really like necessarily, it's not a part of it's not a ranking factor kind of thing. Like it's something that's there for humans so that humans you can entice them to click on it, and it potentially could improve the click-through rate. And it's a bit of a snippet in, hey, visit my page because of this. Yeah. So you could potentially create, let's say 5 or 10 ones yourself that you like. And you could give it, the URL and the title, and then the one that you like. And then you could give it a whole bunch of URLs and other titles and say, create ones in my style. And it would just such a time save. It's fantastic.
So basically in terms of, let's say, automating menial tasks.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Absolute time saver. I think where it's a little bit limited right now, but it will obviously get better as the technology gets better, is in the long form content. that's
Right.
still a little bit hard. So what a lot of people are doing these days is not using ChatGPT per se, but potentially using another, like a programming language like Python, where
Right.
you could potentially have a script that might chain prompts together, kind of thing. So it might be like,
Yeah.
here's a root keyword like watches or something like that. And you tell, you know, your GPT-3 or 3.5 or DaVinci 003 or whatever the latest one that you're using with the API is, can you give me some ideas of some categories that might give you, like vintage watches and men's watches and women's watches and yada, yada, yada. And then you might say, all three of these give me some, you know, some subcategories of those and maybe some topic ideas. And then you could, instead of just using the chat GPT or the, you know, the API or whatever the API you're using, I guess.
Yeah.
And maybe at this time, you know, of recording, we don't have the GPT-4 API yet, but it might be out in a couple of weeks, who knows. But you could also use other APIs, like you'd use Reddit's API, and you could try to like search for things, and you could use, you know, Search Console data, and you could use all this other data to try and like make your prompts a little bit better, and slowly each prompt could be better. And eventually you could ask it, make me an outline for this article, and it has all the points and it has all the subheadings, and you could like iterate it. So I think like some of the bigger ones in the Python space, at least currently, LangChain kind of like allows you to chain these prompts together. And then really, really recently, last couple of weeks, these Auto GPT and Baby AGI. So like,
I think Auto GPT is something we've used, but the other ones I'm just so fascinated. I've not really heard much about it.
Every day there's something new. It's just amazing, but still not exactly there. But instead of having the old limitation was using the playground or using ChatGPT, and it would only give you like 500, 600 words, and the article would be very like superficial and rubbish, kind of thing like that. But now you could like break it down. So like, write me the introduction, and then you could pass the introduction to the next step, and you say, here's my introduction, please do the first bit, and then that one, and then, you know, you can kind of like use it programmatically and try and like make this 4,000 or 5,000 word article. It's really, really good, but would still right now still need a human to actually edit and change and make sure it's all, you know, the way. But it's just absolute time saver. And for people like me that don't always express myself the best way, it's fantastic because it's just such a time saver. So
one of the conversations we normally had was that regardless of how helpful AI has been, we've always noticed that there has to be some kind of human involvement, whether it's either from inputting it in the beginning to at least finalizing whether or not it is accurate content.
Yeah, and so, you know, there's it's kind of like those classic blogs or spam blogs or spinners or all that kind of stuff. Like, people are always going to try and game the algorithms, and I think like last year we definitely saw that trend where people would scrape the people who also asked questions, and they'd put them all up and they'd make an article, and they just like, you know, and a lot of them made heaps and heaps of money and got a lot of traffic because they were just publishing thousands and thousands and thousands of pages a day, and they're getting, you know, and maybe those keywords that they were targeting, like the keyword volume was between, you know, traditionally between 0 and 10, and maybe there's a bigger publication wouldn't go after those keywords because, you know, there's a time and a cost, I guess, but you could really, really quickly create this content and, you know, potentially get clicks from, you know, whatever ad provider you were using. But a lot of them have been nuked. I've definitely seen, just because I think also too, when you create content or you get links, for example, too, if you get too many at once, it's kind of a bit of a red flag. So if you had a smaller site that only had 50 pages and now suddenly you add 2,000 pages at once, that's a lot, kind of thing. You really need to just like slowly phase it out and just add it and have that human involvement and make sure that each bit of content that you're producing, especially for a client facing site, that you're trying to like create this relationship and this authentic relationship with your audience, it has to be, you know, legitimate. It has to be really good. You can't just leave it to the AI. So Yeah, it's helpful, and yeah, like it's fantastic, but it's not the technology that is inherently bad. It's also the person behind it who's using it too. And provided that you are trying to add value, I see nothing wrong with using with AI content. I think that it's fantastic, and definitely going to change a lot, and definitely makes our industry really exciting. But there are plenty of other warnings too, obviously too.
Right. I think the kind of question you were leading me up to is where's your stance on the ethical side of it? Because let's say if I do create a lot of content that's ranking now and it's purely through ChatGPT and other AI tools, if Google is appreciating it, does that mean I should just forget about it and be happy? Or should I at least feel a little bit bad that I'm kind of cheating my way through?
I guess it depends on your own ethical standpoints, and this can be your background, your culture. There's lots of I'm not there's no blanket statement here, I
Right,
guess,
right.
but
What
I
was
think
your ethical?
for me, I think like the black hat in me wouldn't care, and as
Wouldn't.
long as I'm making money, I wouldn't really care. But I think
Right,
like but my true kind of opinion is that you should probably have a disclaimer with your content saying this bit of content has been written with the assistance of AI. Human editors have also looked at it, blah blah blah. And I think
right,
most people won't really care.
right.
But if you're doing it to try and trick them, or to if you're doing it, if you're being nefarious, you're
Yeah.
going to kind of degrade your brand, and kind of your you know the reputation that you might have as well. So I think I think that definitely if you were using AI to help you create your content, you still need to put your own personal spin or your own experience or your own kind of nuance or whatever you need to kind of make this piece of content better or useful or different to whatever's there as well. So I think that if I was trying to have a long term, business, I would have a disclaimer and kind of mention that part of this article has been written with the assistance of AI. So
Because I mean, from my point of view, it's more of like the same thing you said, but more of like not the money side of it, but more of like if I am ranking and Google is happy with what I am providing,
yeah,
do I need to showcase anything? Because Google is happy and technically users are being happy as well. So
yes. So as long as your content is helpful, but I still feel that like
some kind of disclaimer is necessary.
yeah, and I can't remember the companies, but recently, like a couple of them have been found out or found guilty of just using AI, and there's been a bit of backlash. But there's the ones that
Right.
have had the disclaimers that people are a lot more accepting of that, and like, hey, like they're
Right.
trying to add value. They're trying to create more resources that help the end user. It's
Yeah.
just been generated with the assistance of AI, but still,
There's no malicious intent.
exactly, yeah,
All right. Awesome. So I'll get into the three books, three podcasts. What
yeah.
are three books that you would recommend our viewers and listeners to get into? They don't really have to be digital marketing as such, but
Yeah.
if they are, perfect.
I think for books at least, um, there's not like too many SEO books or like digital marketing books that kind of like it just moves too quickly, and maybe there's like other websites that you would kind of look at or something like that too. I did buy Eli Schwartz's product led SEO. That's really really good. I recommend that for most people. That's kind of like maybe a generic one that everyone knows about now, and maybe that's not really a great answer per se, but a lot of the stuff in there was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is good, kind of thing. I think for the other two, for a good SEO too, you can't just live in your own little silo and just just do this kind of stuff. You also have to have other interests and hobbies and other stuff that you're interested in too. So I think for the other two books, um, maybe one would need to be like something into like consumer behavior and psychology and that kind of stuff like that. Um, Maybe the best one there, at least that I've read, would be Influence by Robert Cialdini. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name. It's 20, 30 years old, maybe now, but that's quite a good kind of insight into why people might do things. It was really, really good. And then maybe for a third, for a book, I'm, as you can see behind me, like I'm really into like the murder mysteries and stuff. They just make me think and stuff, and problem solve and that kind of stuff like that. So maybe something like that where you're not using the same parts of your brain. You're using something a little bit more creative and something that's kind of like making you not think of things. So sometimes if I have a problem, it's it's in my kind of my neocortex or my front kind of part, and I can't understand it. If I go for a walk or I read like a mystery novel, or I kind of forget about everything, sometimes that solution or my creative parts of my brain start to work, and I can sometimes come up with a solution. So third book, maybe like also just to understand maybe some business and some psychology stuff. Like I would also say, and this is a bit old school too, but Rees and Trout had the 22 immutable laws of marketing. These are like classics, really old. Guerrilla marketing, J. Conrad Levinson, I think his name was. Some of these like old school kind of marketing strategy books, even The Art of War by Sun Tzu, like these sorts of like kind of strategy books can sometimes be really, really interesting too.
And it kind of also gives you that, like you mentioned, the problem solving aspect, which I think
Yeah,
if you are in the SEO field, you do need to know.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, I think like wherever you are in the industry, like there's you've got competitors,
Right.
and they've got strengths, but they've also got weaknesses too. And if you try and attack that weakness, you can slowly take market share. And if you are one of those bigger businesses that have everything going well, you need to kind of create this defensive moat around your business and stop any new upstarts from encroaching on your area. And I think like something like that is great for SEO, because like for a local business, you might be number one in the map pack, and you might be number one organically, and your job isn't necessarily to get any better, but it's like to keep that there and to
Maintain it.
keep that visibility, and kind of keep your kind of influence strong, and kind of that kind of stuff. So there's always a strength and a weakness, there's always an insight, there's always an in somewhere, and sometimes it takes time to find it.
Right.
Another kind of offhand example that I give other people that I work with is like with architecture. Had an old client way back, like 25 years in the business, awards, heaps of content, thousands of blogs, yada yada yada, but was getting beaten by a page that hardly had any content but just had beautiful photos.
Right.
And so people wanted the beautiful photos. They wanted to see what you built. They didn't care about everything else. So there's always like something that you can kind of, there's a strength and a weakness for everything. Yeah.
Okay. And well, we'll hope our listeners kind of read into these books as well, so that they can tap into their own potential.
Yeah.
But for the people who don't like reading, let's say, what are three podcasts that you would recommend?
So
We're
podcasts,
automatically assuming that the number one is SEO now. So
obviously,
after that,
we need a plug for you guys too. Obviously, yeah, 100%. So for podcasts, I'm not really like necessarily a podcast listener, but I will try to maybe follow some people in the industry and kind of listen to what they've got to say, I guess. So like, maybe that's like kind of a slightly better answer, and you can kind of look at them, and then you can look at whatever podcast they've done, because I think with SEO at least, like there's a finite number of podcasts, and like yeah. But I'd say that maybe people that I would listen to, maybe first of all, Kevin Indig is pretty good. I think he's really great with his thought leadership stuff. He previously was at Shopify as well. I think it was G3 before that. But his like whenever he talks about something, I'll usually listen to it. He usually has some great nuggets of gold that are just like, yeah, this is what I kind of agree with, but I don't necessarily articulate it very well. And he just says it really, really eloquently, and he has a lot of great ideas, and think like he's really on the ball, and lots of good stuff to say about him. Another person that I've started to listen to a lot now too is also Kristen Tinsky. She's founder of a agency called Fractal. She's been really heavily involved in a lot of the AI generation and the content generation, and her agency is kind of involved in both content and also PR and looking for link opportunities and that kind of stuff, and just how that she's kind of automated a lot of stuff using Python, using AI, using these other APIs, and kind of like meshed it all together. And she has a lot of kind of interesting things to say at the moment, which is really, really good. And maybe lastly, maybe just for another person in Melbourne that if your visitors never heard of too, we've got in our local community here a person by the name of Nick Ranger, and she's absolutely lovely. She's so interested in SEO, and she will help everybody, and she's just absolutely lovely, and she's just so passionate about SEO. And so if you can find any of the podcasts that she's been on, like definitely listen to those. Just she's definitely really, she's in it for the long haul. Like some of the stuff that she says is fantastic, and definitely kind of gets me thinking too. So shout out to her as well.
Thank you so much for the call. It was great. I've learned pretty much how to start up an e-commerce store, set up everything I need, and also use AI content to help me with my SEO part. I hope we can have another call to get more into it and get more details out of you. But till then, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Aaron, for having me. And like, definitely great to have a chat. And I'd love to be on again. Definitely, like
whenever you're free.
So thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for watching that episode. I hope you enjoyed. For more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe.